is broader and complex than any individual's activities. If we do not understand that, we will reduce righteousness to a set of practices and lose the opportunity for worship and growth. In the book of Job, the battle was bigger than Job and his lifestyle. It was actually between God and Satan, between governments and not individuals. When righteousness or God is reduced to a thing or an activity that we do, we fail to see his glory, and then we end up fitting God in our own thinking. Now, that was the reason God forbade his people from making any idol, because they would reduce or limit God to their idea and level. You see, because of, for example, because of how we value a cow, we may decide to make God into a cow. But then when you go to the Bible, God has qualities of an eagle, a lion, a buffalo, or an ox. That means we cannot reduce God to any one thing. That is why God prefers to be worshipped without any physical images, because those physical images will bring some delimitation or in our mind, and we will now fail to see the growth and the vastness of God beyond any understanding. So the fact that God tells his people not to make an idol of him is to tell them, I am limitless. You cannot conceive me. You can't fit me into your head or into any single practice. I am beyond your thinking. Another thing is that, and I'm going to read a text down there, when we limit God or righteousness to a set of practices, for example, to a dressing or practice, we become selective rather than embracing God or righteousness as a whole. Let me give an example. If we decide that our whole worship has been reduced to 5 practices, like giving tithe, praying 3 times a day, wearing a certain kind of dress, if we reduce God to that set of practices, we will never want anything that goes beyond those practices. And those practices will be our own limitation. So whatever is designed by us can also be altered according to our convenience. That is why we human beings, when we conceive God and then we design religion and limit ourselves to certain practices, then because we designed the practices, we can also change them. So that ends up to be our own righteousness rather than the righteousness of God. The Pharisees' religion was more about them than God. When you study the gospel, you will find they were opposing Jesus and they were telling him, our this, our this. It was no longer about God. It was about them. When it is about God, we remain open to continuous guidance into his ways. And that is why the book of Job, now I'm going to read these 2 texts. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? You realize Job is not in this meeting. This is a meeting between God and Satan. That shows you that the human being known as Job, is not the center here. The center is God. Satan is actually challenging God through Job. The target of all these attacks was not Job. This was about God. Was an attack against the righteousness of God, but it had to be conceptualized in the life of Job. That is where it found expression. But the devil was targeting God. Job was not invited in person to this controversy. He was not even aware. By attacking Job, Satan was in essence attacking God. So God, not us, is the issue. And that makes righteousness God-centered rather than human-centered. And you realize at the end of that book, God is vindicated before Job because it was about God. Chapter 42 says, "And so it was, after the Lord had spoken these words to Job, that the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, My wrath is aroused against you and your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." This is about God. It was not about Job. God is finally vindicated before Job because it was not about Job. It is my prayer that we do not make righteousness and religion our property or us-centered. This is about God. We are challenged to continually grow, but when we limit it to a certain set of practices, then we will not want anything more apart from what we have designed by our own thinking. God is larger. Righteousness is limitless. We are challenged to daily growth and to apply righteousness as God brings it to our situations. But when we have certain set policies, then we may exhaust them and we will not have the power or the knowledge to address our life as it unfolds continuously. May it be about God. May it be the vindication of God before our own vindication is our prayer in Jesus' name.